Thom Hartmann here on the best of the rest of science and green news. You need to know this. The action we take right now on climate change could dictate what life is like on this planet for the next 10,000 years. According to a new study published in the journal Nature Climate Change, the next few decades, this is a quote, the next few decades offer a brief window of opportunity to minimize large-scale and potentially catastrophic climate change that will extend longer than the entire history of human civilization thus far, end of quote. In other words, we may be looking at our last chance to ensure that future generations can survive on our warming planet. This new study says that if we put off reducing carbon emissions by even 10 years, it will have a huge impact on sea level rise, ocean acidification, and peak atmospheric temperatures. Researchers warn that our current goal of 2 degrees Celsius rise in average temperatures already locks in about a 25-meter sea level rise over the next 2,000 years. If we don't meet that 2-degree goal, sea level rise could be as high as 50 meters, roughly 75 feet, which would completely change the map of the world as we know it. In addition to sea level rise, our current rate of pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere will increase ocean acidification and pretty much lock in the destruction of marine ecosystems throughout the world. Once our oceans are destroyed and our coastal environments are underwater, life as we know it will largely cease to exist. Thomas Stocker, a climate physicist who worked on this recent study, said, quote, "The long-term view sends the chilling message of what the real risks and consequences are of the fossil fuel era." He added, quote, "It will commit us to massive adaptation efforts so that for many, dislocation and migration becomes the only option," end quote. If we don't want the next generations to be faced with such a dystopian survival, we must act now to establish policies that will bring about a cleaner, greener future. There are many theories about why Neanderthals went extinct with the rise of modern man, ranging from disease to climate change, but new research says that the cultural differences could be the real reason that early species disappeared. Based on fossil records, scientists know that modern man moved into Europe around 45,000 years ago, after Neanderthals were already living undisturbed lives in that area. However, within a few thousand years, the Neanderthals were gone. By using computer models to account for cultural and technical abilities in each group, scientists came to the determination that modern man's, quote, greater cultural advantage, end quote, allowed them to outwit and outpopulate the Neanderthals. In other words, it was likely a combination of skills like hunting, settling land, and developing more tools that gave our ancestors an edge over that more primitive species. And that combination of skills, knowledge, and abilities can only be described as culture. The science shows that the basic skills, traditions, and knowledge of our species has had a profound impact on our ability to survive. Perhaps we should remember that and find a little more time to appreciate the diverse human culture that gave rise to our species. The Indian Point nuclear plant sits just 25 miles from New York City on the banks of the Hudson River. So you would think that a radioactive leak at that plant would be a huge news story. Last week, the owner of that plant reported alarming, that's a quote, this is a quote, alarming levels of radioactivity at 3 monitoring wells, with one well's radioactivity increasing nearly 65,000%, end of quote. In a statement about that leak, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's office said that they had evidence that, quote, radioactive tritium-contained water leaked into the groundwater, end quote, underneath the nuclear facility. The governor has called for an investigation, quote, to determine the extent of the release, its likely duration, cause, and potential impacts to the environment and public health, end quote. But there's no telling how long that investigation may take or whether there are safety concerns for the public. Yet again, we see that there is simply no such thing as safe nuclear energy. The only question is, what's it going to take to make us wake up and say no nukes once and for all? Duke Energy is going to have to pay up for the massive coal ash spill of 2014. Last week, North Carolina regulators issued a fine of $6.6 million for violations that led to the toxic spill at that company's Dan River plant in the town of Eden. This new fine is in addition to the $102 million in fines and restitution that Duke agreed to pay when they pleaded guilty to federal pollution crimes. And the state agency says that these civil penalties could go even higher. In 2014, Duke Energy's failure to heed warnings allowed 27 million gallons of contaminated water and 39,000 tons of coal ash to leak into the Dan River. That toxic sludge contained chemicals like mercury, lead, and arsenic, and contaminated drinking water for countless residents. Although these fines can't undo the damage caused by the massive spill, they do force Duke Energy to pay some of the cost to clean up that disaster. And hopefully they'll make corporate polluters think twice about skipping on safety to increase profits. Hopefully that will help prevent another disaster, although it might be better if some of these executives went to prison. And finally, with population growth and a rapidly shrinking amount of farmland, many people are wondering about the future of farming. And one company in Boston thinks they have the solution: shipping containers. Startup company known as Freight Farms has introduced leafy green machines, which are refrigerated shipping containers that contain hydroponic farms. The units are made from old freight containers, and they can grow as much as 2 acres of farmland. Freight Farms is just one of the companies looking for new ways to feed and care for the planet in decades to come. And the leafy green machine may be the future of food production. And that's the way it is for the week of February 15th, 2016. I'm Thom Hartmann on Science and Green News. To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.